Welcome to the 18th video in the Colored Pencil course brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com, Watercolor and Colored Pencils, Part 1. The nature of colored pencils allow them to be used in conjunction with a variety of other mediums. In this module, we'll look at combining the painting medium of watercolor with colored pencils. The characteristics of watercolor make it a great medium to use in conjunction with colored pencils. The binder used in most watercolor paints, typically gum arabic, provides a suitable surface for layering. This allows for applications of colored pencil over washed areas. When watercolor is used in this manner, it becomes the vehicle for an underpainting. Colored pencil applications can be made directly over the watercolor underpainting, enriching the color. The marks that are produced by watercolor paints are clearly different from those made with a colored pencil. Combining the mediums allows the artist to produce a wider range of marks and textural effects in the artwork. The characteristics of both mediums can be exploited to take advantage of the strengths of each medium. Watercolor is a softer medium, capable of subtle shifts in color and value. Colored pencils are capable of defined lines, intense colors, and more control. For this demonstration, we will approach the work by creating an underpainting with watercolor and then apply layers of colored pencil applications. Another approach is to apply colored pencils first and then apply washes of watercolor. If this second approach is taken, the wax or oil binder of the colored pencil will resist the watercolor washes, and paint will only adhere to the surface where no colored pencil has been applied. Let's take a look at the process of creating an underpainting with watercolor and then layering on top with colored pencils. In this demonstration, I'm working on Cold Press Illustration Board by Canson. This surface will allow a smooth but rigid surface to work upon. We'll begin by drawing out the contour lines of the strawberry using an HB or number 2 pencil. We'll lift up some of the graphite using a kneaded eraser. Then, using a small brush, we'll apply liquid masking fluid in areas of intense highlight. This will prevent the watercolor from reaching these areas. Now we're ready to start applying the watercolor washes. We'll start with alizarin crimson. I'm using a nylon brush to apply the washes. These washes will be transparent, and in between each wash will allow the surface to dry before applying additional applications. Since the right side of the strawberry has more shadow, we'll apply additional washes on the side. I'll also use a little bit of ultramarine in the mix to create a purple area for the shadow. In some areas, I'll be more controlled with the brush, creating a few indications of detail. Slowly, we'll intensify the washes that we are applying. This will create a nice base or an underpainting for the subsequent applications of colored pencil. Next, a mixture of sap green and yellow ochre is applied to the small leaves on the tip of the strawberry. Here again, a translucent wash is applied. A bit of variety in color and intensity can be created by using less water. Also, after an area has been completely dried, additional washes can be added. A mixture of ultramarine and burnt umber is used to initially establish the area of shadow. After this area has dried, an additional application is applied. Ultramarine is mixed with sap green to create darker greens that are applied to areas of the leaves of the strawberry. A few details are added, with the understanding that many of the details will be added with the colored pencils later in the drawing. A third application is applied to the cast shadow area, again using a mixture of ultramarine and burnt umber. To increase the intensity of the color and to add variety to the reds inherent in the underpainting, cadmium red is applied to the main body of the strawberry. This color is added mostly in the mid-tone areas that exist on the strawberry. The paint is applied using brush strokes that will help mimic the surface texture of the strawberry. Shadows are darkened with an additional mixture of cadmium red and ultramarine. This will create areas of natural-looking shadow that are almost red-purple. Using a bit of water, we can smooth out transitions between the area of coarse shadow and the midtone on the strawberry. Once this area has had enough time to dry, we can remove the liquid mask with our finger by rubbing over the surface. Now we can start to apply our applications of colored pencils. We'll start with a cream, and we'll use this cream just to redefine some of the seeds that exist on the strawberry. To deepen the color, yellow ochre is applied on top. Dark umber can be used to establish some of the shadows and increase the contrast. We'll continue this process for each of the seeds on the strawberry. We can also establish some of the coarse shadow that exists on the strawberry using dark umber. A heavy application of crimson red is layered over the top of the dark umber. Crimson red will be used throughout the drawing. It will be used generally as a base tone for the strawberry. We'll also use it in the dimpled areas around each of the individual seeds. Some of the areas will be left alone, allowing the watercolor washes to show through. White is used to burnish a few of the applications of crimson red, also to intensify the highlights that exist in between each seed. The process of developing the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights continues using crimson red, dark umber, and then burnishing with white. Because we have developed an underpainting using the watercolor, less colored pencil material will need to be applied to the surface. You'll find that you can develop colors quickly because of the underpainting. Each seed on the strawberry exists in a small indentation on the surface. We'll create the illusion of these indentions by making the value a slight bit darker around each seed. The areas in between the indentions will be lighter in value, and these areas are burnished with the white. In some areas, the highlight is very intense. The surface is very shiny in these areas. We have preserved these areas with the liquid mask, but we may find that we need to change the shape of these highlighted areas. We can do this with the application of crimson red. Of course, if the value needs to be adjusted around these highlighted areas, they can be burnished with white. Burnishing in this case also smooths out the surface texture, making the surface texture more harmonious with the watercolor underpainting. We'll continue to work the seeds, in this case from the left side of the strawberry to the right, using the same approach for each dimple, layering the crimson red, then burnishing with white and adding shadows if necessary with dark umber. The right side of the strawberry features stronger shadows. The dimples will still exist, but will need a darker value of red to establish the shadows. Crimson Lake is used to accomplish this darker value of red. We'll also use cream to establish the highlights in between instead of using white. We'll still use crimson red in this area, but remember the darker values will be established with crimson red. Instead of burnishing with white in many of these areas, we'll use the colorless blender in order to preserve the darker values that we've established. We can also be more liberal with our application of dark umber, making the shadows darker. Many of the seeds on this side of the strawberry are also very dark. We'll continue to establish the small dimples in the core shadow area of the strawberry. In this case, I'm establishing a preliminary shape using dark umber. Because we want to preserve some of the areas of blue shadow that exist on this side, we won't cover the entire area with an application of colored pencil. We still will use some of the Crimson Lake in this area, however, to make the dark red tones that are necessary. We'll establish some of the seeds that are visible using cream. And then we'll push some of the highlights that exist in between the shadows of each dimple. This will make the shadows appear darker. There's a bit of reflected highlight that exists on the very bottom of the strawberry as well. We'll apply that with a very light hand. And this will bring us to the conclusion of the first part of this demonstration. So what did we discuss in this module? The characteristics of watercolor and colored pencils allow for the mediums to be combined easily in an artwork. Watercolor washes can be applied as an underpainting and then layered over with colored pencil applications. The strengths of each medium can be exploited in the process. In the next module of this series, we'll complete the drawing.